The peaceful planet of Althar was dying. It had been a quiet and prosperous world, known for its lush forests and beautiful oceans. The people of Althar lived in harmony with nature, and their advanced technology had made them a beacon of hope and peace in their corner of the galaxy. But that peace was shattered in an instant. A dark, menacing shadow had arrived, and with it, destruction. The Korek, a ruthless and brutal empire from the far reaches of the galaxy, had set their eyes on Althar. Their fleet was enormous, filled with warships and weapons that could turn entire cities to dust in seconds. The people of Althar had tried to fight back, but their defenses were no match for the Korek. Their weapons were old, their technology outdated, and the Korek knew it. The invasion was swift and merciless. For days, the Korek forces hammered Althar's cities with relentless bombardments. Millions of people died in the first few hours. Those who survived were forced into hiding, hoping for a miracle. But there was no miracle coming. The people of Althar knew they were doomed, and their only hope was a desperate, last-ditch effort. A single SOS, a call for help that would echo through the stars, asking for help from anyone who might hear it. The signal was sent out across the galaxy. It was faint, but it was enough. It carried the last words of Althar's leaders, a message of desperation. We are under attack. We cannot hold much longer. Please, someone, help us. We beg you. Back on Earth, the message was received just as the sun began to set. The signal arrived at Earth's military command center, where General Simmons, the head of humanity's most elite fleet, was finishing up his day. He was an experienced officer, a battle-hardened leader who had seen countless wars and conflicts across the galaxy. But as he listened to the transmission, something about this one struck him. The desperation in the voice of the Althar leader was like nothing he had ever heard before. "We've never received a call like this before," one of Simmons' officers said. It sounds real, like they're truly about to lose everything." Simmons nodded, his face grim. He'd heard of the Korek before. Everyone had. They were known for their violent ways and their desire to conquer anything they could get their hands on. But Althar, a peaceful world, surrounded by species who had always been on the edge of the galaxy. For the Korek to come here, something had to have gone wrong. This wasn't just a raid. This was an all-out war. "We need to act," Simmons said, his voice firm. He turned to his officers, giving them instructions. "Prepare the fleet. We're going in." But Simmons knew there was more to this decision than just protecting one planet. The Korek Empire was known for its cruelty, and if they were allowed to conquer Althar without any resistance, it would send a message to every other species in the galaxy that the Korek could do whatever they wanted, without fear of consequence. The galaxy was already a place of instability, with wars breaking out here and there. But this could spark something much worse. If humanity did nothing, what would happen next? "General, we can't just send our fleet to fight the Korek," one officer cautioned. "They're too powerful. Their fleet is massive. We'll be outnumbered, outgunned." Simmons thought for a moment. He had heard the same doubts before in every war he'd fought, but he had seen humanity's fleet fight and win against impossible odds. He knew the power of his crew and the deadliness of his ships. He wasn't going to sit back and watch another peaceful world fall to an empire like the Korek. Not if he could help it. "We're not just going to fight them. We're going to stop them," he said firmly. "We'll show them why humanity is not to be underestimated." He turned to the communications officer. "Send a reply to Althar. Tell them help is on the way. We will not let the Korek win." As the words were transmitted, humanity's fleet began to mobilize. Ships lined up at Earth's spaceports, ready to launch at a moment's notice. It was a massive operation. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a message to the galaxy. The deadliest fleet in humanity's history was about to move, and nothing would stand in their way. The fleet left Earth's atmosphere, quickly entering the void of space. Their mission was clear: get to Althar, stop the Korek, and ensure that the peaceful world had a chance to survive. As they traveled, General Simmons watched the stars pass by. His mind was focused on the battle ahead, but a nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind. Would they be ready for the Korek? They had fought in many wars, but nothing could prepare them for what they were about to face. As the fleet drew closer to Alfar, General Simmons received another transmission. This time, it wasn't from Alfar. It was from the Korek. A booming voice filled the comms, one that carried a threat in every word. "This is the Korek Empire," the voice said. "Stay out of our way, humans. This planet is ours now. If you interfere, you will face the full wrath of the Korek." Simmons smiled grimly. "Let them come," he muttered. "They'll learn what happens when they pick a fight with the deadliest species in the galaxy." As the fleet moved closer to Alfar, the tension in the air grew thicker. The galaxy was about to see what humanity could do when pushed to its limits. And if the Korek thought they could defeat humanity so easily, they were about to learn a hard lesson. The battle for Alfar was about to begin. As the massive fleet of humanity moved closer to Alfar, the air inside the command ship buzzed with tension. The men and women aboard the fleet knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a rescue mission. This was a chance to prove to the galaxy that humanity wasn't a species to be underestimated. But as they neared Alfar, they realized they weren't alone in the void of space. The Korek fleet, which had been occupying the planet, was already preparing for war. It was a sight that sent chills down the spine of anyone who had ever faced the Korek before. Their ships were massive and terrifying, their designs built for destruction. The sheer size of their fleet dwarfed humanity's forces. There were thousands of Korek warships, all heavily armed and ready to tear Alfar apart. It seemed impossible for humanity to stand a chance. General Simmons, standing at the front of the bridge, gazed out of the viewing window. The planet of Alfar was visible in the distance, a beautiful blue and green world surrounded by the harsh black of space. But the peaceful world was anything but peaceful now. Smoke and fire rose from its surface as the Korek forces ravaged the cities, destroying everything in their path. "General, we're picking up their fleet formations," an officer said, bringing up a holographic display of the Korek fleet. "They're preparing for a full-scale battle. It's going to be tough." Simmons studied the display, his jaw tight. There were far more Korek ships than humanity had, and their ships were designed for one thing: destruction. But there was something that the Korek didn't understand about humanity. "We're outnumbered, but we're not outgunned," Simmons said, his voice cold and determined. "Prepare for battle. All ships, form up on my command." The fleet began to position itself, the ships moving in perfect unison. The humanity fleet was smaller, yes, but each ship was built for speed and agility. They had the advantage in that area. The Korek were powerful, but they were also slow and cumbersome. Humanity's fleet had been designed with one purpose in mind: to strike fast, hit hard, and never give up. And that's exactly what they intended to do. The comms officer received another transmission, this time from the Korek warlord himself. His voice came through the speakers, deep and filled with a cold menace. "You are foolish to come here, humans," the warlord growled. "You cannot stop us. Leave now, or we will destroy you as well." Simmons glanced at the crew, his eyes filled with a hard resolve. "We don't leave," he replied, his voice a low growl of defiance. "We fight." With that, the order was given. Humanity's fleet surged forward, their engines roaring to life as they broke through the void of space, heading straight for the Korek ships. The first few moments of the battle were chaos. The Korek fired massive volleys of energy blasts, their weapons crackling with deadly power. But humanity's ships moved with terrifying precision, dodging and weaving between the blasts. They returned fire, their weapons lighting up the dark expanse of space, sending streaks of deadly energy towards the Korek ships. The Korek fleet, though large, was slow to react. They were used to overpowering their enemies with sheer numbers and firepower, but humanity's ships were different. They moved with grace and speed, striking fast and retreating before the Korak could even react. Each strike from humanity's ships hit with pinpoint accuracy, tearing through the Korak's defenses like paper. Simmons watched the battle unfold on the bridge, his heart pounding in his chest. The Korak were strong, but they were sloppy. Their formations were broken, their ships scattered and vulnerable. Humanity's fleet was starting to make an impact, taking down Korak ships with every strike. "We've got them on the ropes, General," one of the officers called out. "Their lines are starting to break." But just as humanity seemed to be gaining the upper hand, the Korak unleashed their full fury. A massive Korak dreadnought appeared from behind the planet's moon, its weapons crackling with an immense power. It opened fire with a devastating energy beam, tearing through the hull of one of humanity's ships. The ship exploded into a fiery ball of debris, and the rest of the fleet faltered for a moment. "Get that dreadnought in our sights. Focus fire," Simmons shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. The fleet responded immediately, converging on the massive Korak warship. The battle had taken a deadly turn. The Korak weren't just fighting. They were desperate to end this battle quickly, and they had brought out their most powerful weapon to do so. Humanity's ships raced toward the dreadnought, dodging its blasts and retaliating with everything they had. The Korak warship fired again, a beam of energy that threatened to tear through the fleet. But just as the beam was about to strike, a smaller human ship darted in front of the blast, absorbing the energy in a desperate move to save the others. "Impact!" one officer shouted, as the ship was ripped apart by the energy blast. Simmons clenched his fists, his heart heavy. "We will not let their sacrifice be in vain," he muttered. "Focus all fire on that dreadnought. Bring it down." Humanity's fleet pressed on, pushing through the pain of loss and focusing on the mission. The battle raged on, the fate of Althar hanging in the balance. The Korak had made a terrible mistake. They thought humanity was just another race to conquer, another species to crush beneath their heels. But they had underestimated the resolve and the fury of the human spirit. And they were about to learn a painful lesson. The situation in space was rapidly growing more dire. The massive Korak dreadnought, still firing its devastating energy blasts, had crippled several of humanity's ships, and the losses were mounting. The crew aboard the remaining ships watched in horror as one by one, their comrades fell under the overwhelming firepower of the Korak warship. Each explosion sent a shockwave of dread through their ranks. They were outnumbered, and now they were outgunned too. The odds of survival were growing slimmer by the minute. On the bridge of the flagship Victory, General Simmons gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He had seen battles, fought in wars before, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. The Korak dreadnought, with its monstrous size and unmatched firepower, seemed unstoppable. But one thing the Korak didn't know about humanity was that they always fought back, no matter the odds. Humanity didn't know how to quit. "We've lost another cruiser, General," the communications officer said, her voice trembling. "The Korak dreadnought is tearing us apart." Simmons glanced out the viewport, his eyes narrowing. The dreadnought loomed in the distance, a floating fortress of death. It fired again, sending a massive energy beam that destroyed yet another human ship. It seemed impossible. No one could survive this kind of onslaught. But then, something shifted. A soft beep echoed from the officer's console, a faint signal. It wasn't much, just a tiny whisper in the chaos of the battle. But to Simmons, it was a glimmer of hope, a sign that humanity still had a chance. He turned to the officer. "Track that signal. What is it?" The officer's eyes widened. It's coming from one of our ships, the Defender. They've sent a distress beacon, but the ship's still operational." Simmons' heart skipped a beat. The Defender was one of humanity's elite ships, a battleship designed for just this type of war. If it was still operational, it could be the key to turning the tide. "Set a course for the Defender," Simmons ordered. "We're going to need every ship we can get." The bridge buzzed with activity as the fleet quickly shifted course toward the Defender. As they did, another explosion rocked the fleet. A Korek missile had found its target. Yet again, a human ship was destroyed. The pain of each loss weighed heavily on everyone aboard. But Simmons pushed forward, focusing on the mission ahead. The Korek dreadnought fired another round, its beam cutting through the darkness of space. This time, it was headed straight for the Victory. The officers aboard the bridge braced themselves, but Simmons remained calm. He'd been through this before. The trick was to keep his mind clear and make every shot count. Evasive maneuvers, Simmons barked. Deploy all shields. The Victory lurched as its engines roared to life, pulling the ship into a sudden dive. The energy beam from the Korek dreadnought barely missed, grazing the shields with an explosion of energy that rattled the entire ship. The crew held their breath, waiting for the next move. Meanwhile, the Defender, still intact, was approaching the battlefield. The ship's commanding officer, Captain Ralston, had seen the horrors humanity was facing, but she wasn't ready to give up. As her ship made its way closer to the Victory, she keyed into the comms. "General Simmons, this is Captain Ralston. We've got your back. We're going to take down that dreadnought." Simmons' voice came through the comm, steady and filled with resolve. "Understood, Captain. Let's end this." The two ships, the Victory and the Defender, came together in a coordinated strike against the Korek dreadnought. With both ships moving in synchronized maneuvers, they caught the Korek by surprise. The Korek, though powerful, weren't prepared for the speed and precision of humanity's ships working together. "We've got them now," Captain Ralston said, her fingers flying over the console as she targeted the dreadnought's weak spots. The Korek warship was large, but it had vulnerabilities. Its massive engines, its energy storage systems, every part of it had a point of weakness. The Victory launched a salvo of missiles, each one hitting the dreadnought's armor, sending sparks flying. The Defender followed up with a volley of concentrated laser fire, aimed directly at the dreadnought's power core. The Korek warship shuddered under the assault, its shields flickering under the concentrated firepower. But the Korek weren't done yet. The dreadnought responded with a final, desperate strike, unleashing all its remaining energy in a massive wave of destruction. It hit both ships head-on, knocking them back and sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The explosion rocked the Defender and the Victory, tearing through their shields. For a moment, it seemed as though everything was lost. But the human fleet didn't back down. They had been through worse. In the chaos, the Defender pulled off an incredible maneuver, dodging the Korek's final blast, and at that moment, Simmons saw his chance. "Fire everything," he commanded. Humanity's ships unleashed everything they had left. Energy beams, missiles, and torpedoes rained down on the Korek dreadnought, hitting it from every angle. The Korek ship groaned under the barrage, its hull cracking and breaking apart. Then, with a final deafening explosion, the dreadnought was gone. The galaxy fell silent. For a brief moment, no one could speak. They had done it. They had destroyed the Korek dreadnought. But it wasn't just a victory over a ship. It was a victory over the very idea that humanity could be destroyed. The remaining Korek ships, seeing their greatest weapon destroyed, retreated, vanishing into the void of space. The battle was won, but the cost had been great. The aftermath of the battle left humanity's fleet battered, but victorious. As the debris of the shattered Korek dreadnought floated in the void, the victorious ships drifted slowly, their once pristine surfaces now scared by the fierce conflict. The damage was extensive, but the message was clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The Korek had been defeated, but at a high cost. The Victory and the Defender limped away from the wreckage, their engines sputtering as they struggled to maintain orbit. On the bridge of the Victory, General Simmons stared out into the cold expanse of space, his mind heavy with the weight of their triumph. He couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was lurking, waiting for humanity to lower its guard. It was a victory, yes, but it was also a warning. Damage report. Simmons demanded, his voice calm, but his mind racing. "All major systems are offline, General," the officer replied, her voice low. "We're down to 25% power. The Defender is in worse shape. Their main engines are severely damaged. It'll take at least 2 weeks for full repairs to even begin." Simmons nodded grimly, but he didn't need the report to know how bad things were. The fleet had barely survived this battle. And now, with their resources drained, they would need time they didn't have. Meanwhile, on the Defender, Captain Ralston paced the command deck. Her normally unshakable confidence had been worn thin by the intensity of the battle. Her crew had lost too many good men and women, and the cost of victory weighed heavily on her shoulders. But she knew they had done what no one thought possible. They had struck down the Korek, the most feared species in the galaxy. "Captain, the comms are live," one of her officers called out. Ralston turned to face the screen, where the familiar face of Fleet Admiral Grayson appeared. His usual stoic expression had given way to something much darker. "Captain Ralston, General Simmons, good work on taking down the Korek," Admiral Grayson said. "But don't get too comfortable. This was just a warning shot." Ralston stiffened. "What do you mean, Admiral?" Grayson's gaze hardened. "The Korek aren't the only threat out there. There are others, more dangerous than anything you can imagine. And they've been watching us. Now that we've defeated the Korek, they're going to want to see what we can do next. And if you think they'll be merciful, you're wrong. We're about to find out what it truly means to be the most lethal species in the galaxy." Ralston's stomach tightened. She had known that defeating the Korek would not end the war, but she hadn't expected this. There was more coming, more that humanity had yet to face. "Understood, Admiral," she replied, her voice steady, though she felt the weight of his words settle on her like a heavy cloak. "We'll be ready." As the transmission ended, a sense of unease filled the air. The battle may have been won, but it had only set the stage for something much larger. The Korek were just the beginning. Simmons, aboard the Victory, issued orders to the fleet. "We'll need to regroup. Prepare for reinforcements. I want every ship we can muster, and we need to be prepared for whatever comes next." Meanwhile, the galaxy watched. News of humanity's victory over the Korek dreadnought spread like wildfire. Across countless star systems, transmissions were sent, and fleets prepared for whatever was to come. Humanity had made its mark, but now the galaxy was bracing for the repercussions of this unexpected victory. And not all of them were good. A few days later, a cryptic message was intercepted by human intelligence. The message was simple, but chilling. The Korek were only the first. The real war begins now. The word sent shockwaves through humanity's leadership. No one knew who had sent it, but the message was clear. Humanity was about to face an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. The question was no longer if humanity could survive, it was who would survive. Meanwhile, on the outer rim of the galaxy, hidden in the shadows of distant star systems, the true power behind the Korek began to stir. And the galaxy trembled in fear of what was coming next. The days after the battle felt like a restless pause, like the calm before a storm. Humanity's fleets, battered and bruised but still intact, were recovering from their near-total loss at the hands of the Korek. The Victory and the Defender were undergoing repairs, their crews working tirelessly to patch up their ships. The rest of the fleet had scattered across the galaxy, regrouping and rebuilding, each ship harboring the same uneasy sense of foreboding that had settled over them all. On the Victory, General Simmons stood by the communications console, staring out into the vast expanse of space. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was the only sound on the bridge. But within him, a storm was brewing, a storm of doubt and fear. They had defeated the Korek, yes, but Simmons couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger, much more terrifying. That cryptic message. The Korek were only the first. The real war begins now. Kept replaying in his mind. Who had sent it? And more importantly, what did they mean? General Simmons, "We've got a new signal," the communications officer said, breaking his thoughts. Simmons snapped his attention to the officer, his instincts flaring. "Where's it coming from?" It's not from the Korak. In fact, it's not from any known species. It's too encrypted for us to decode fully, but we're getting bits of it. It's faint, but definitely not local. It's coming from the outer rim." Simmons' heart skipped a beat. The outer rim was considered the farthest and most dangerous part of the galaxy, a place where even the most seasoned explorers feared to tread. But why would an unknown enemy send a message from there? And why now, right after the Korak defeat? He made a decision in an instant. Prepare the fleet. We're heading to the outer rim. Meanwhile, on the Defender, Captain Ralston paced her quarters, her eyes glued to the reports streaming in from all corners of the galaxy. The victory over the Korak had made waves, but it had also drawn attention from far more dangerous forces. Forces that hadn't made themselves known before. Forces that now saw humanity as a growing threat. Ralston's comm panel buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. She pressed a button, and the image of Admiral Grayson appeared on the screen. His face was grim, his eyes filled with worry. "Captain, you need to hear this," Grayson said. "We've detected more of those encrypted signals. They're not just coming from the outer rim. They're everywhere. The galaxy is filled with them, but no one knows who or what is sending them." Ralston's heart sank. The galaxy was full of mysteries, but this was different. This wasn't a coincidence. Whoever was behind this had been watching them and waiting for the right moment to strike. "We need to find out who's behind this before it's too late," Ralston replied, her voice cold and calculated. "Prepare the Defender. We're heading to the outer rim too." As the human fleets advanced toward the outer rim, tension hung thick in the air. The crew of the Victory and Defender knew that this wasn't just a routine scouting mission. There was something far more sinister lurking in the unknown depths of space. General Simmons and Captain Ralston, though separated by distance, both felt it. The weight of uncertainty pressed on their minds, a constant reminder that their victory over the Korak had likely opened the door to something far worse. On the Victory, Simmons gathered his senior officers in the war room. The room was dimly lit, the walls covered with holographic projections of star systems and fleet positions. The officers sat around the table, their faces grim, their eyes reflecting the same unease Simmons had felt ever since the message from the outer rim had been received. "General," one of the officers began, "what if these signals aren't just coming from one enemy? What if there are multiple factions, all preparing to attack at once?" Simmons nodded slowly. "That's a possibility, but we can't jump to conclusions. What we know for sure is that whoever is behind these signals has been watching us, learning from our victories and defeats. They've been studying us. The question is, what do they want?" "We need to act fast," another officer said. "If we wait too long, they could strike first." Simmons stood and paced the room, his thoughts clouded with suspicion. Humanity had made a lot of enemies in its rise to power. But these new signals, these new enemies, were different. They were clever, hidden in the shadows, waiting for humanity to make a mistake. "The galaxy is changing," Simmons finally said. "The war we just fought may be over, but a new one is on the horizon. And this time, we won't have the element of surprise. We'll have to be prepared for anything." The Defender arrived at the edge of the outer rim, the coordinates from the mysterious signal now clear. The stars grew distant, and the ship was surrounded by the vast emptiness of space. The tension among the crew was palpable. They were entering hostile territory, and there was no telling what awaited them. Captain Ralston stood at the command console, staring at the swirling stars outside the viewport. "This is it," she muttered under her breath. "We're walking straight into the unknown." Suddenly, the ship's sensors blared, a warning flashing across the screen. Something was there. A presence, vast and powerful, was approaching. The crew watched in silence as an enormous shadow slowly took shape in the distance. A ship, an ancient alien design, unlike anything they had ever seen. Ralston's voice came through, cold and commanding. "Prepare for combat." But even as she spoke, a realization dawned on her. Humanity had just stepped into the very heart of something far bigger than they had ever imagined. Something ancient, something powerful, and it was coming for them. The massive alien ship loomed in the distance, its dark silhouette taking shape against the endless stars. It was unlike anything the crew of the Defender had ever seen, sleek and ominous, its design strange and ancient, as though it had existed long before humanity's rise. The sensors buzzed, trying to make sense of the data, but nothing came close to identifying the massive vessel. The ship was not merely alien. It was something beyond the known galaxy, something that made even seasoned veterans like Captain Ralston feel the cold touch of fear. "Captain, the unknown ship is powering up," one of the officers reported, his voice trembling slightly. "We can't tell what kind of weapons it has. It's completely off the charts." Ralston's grip tightened on the command console. The calmness in her voice hid the uncertainty that gnawed at her insides. "All hands, prepare for the worst. Shields up. Weapons ready." The massive ship seemed to move slowly, almost deliberately, as if it were savoring the fear it instilled in the human fleet. On the bridge, everyone was silent, eyes fixed on the main screen. No one spoke. The feeling of dread in the air was palpable, like the calm before a hurricane. A sudden crackling noise cut through the silence. A voice echoed in, distant and distorted, speaking in a language no one on the ship could understand. But as it came through the comms, the translation protocol kicked in, slowly deciphering the strange language. The words were haunting, simple, and chilling. "Humanity is an anomaly. A mistake. You were never meant to rise." Ralston's heart skipped a beat. The voice wasn't just alien. It was old, ancient, and filled with a deep sense of contempt. Whoever was speaking, they were not like the Korek or any other species humanity had faced. This was something older, far more powerful, and far more dangerous. "Who are you?" Ralston demanded, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. "What do you want?" There was a long pause, and then the voice replied, this time more clearly, its words cutting through the tension. "We are the architects. We forged the galaxy. And you, human, are nothing but a fleeting spark in the darkness." The words hit like a physical blow, the meaning sinking into everyone's bones. The architects, the very name struck fear into the hearts of those who had heard of them. An ancient race, lost to history, whose influence stretched across the stars long before the Korek or even humanity had risen. The architects had shaped the galaxy, left their mark on every species, and had seemingly disappeared into the shadows of time. But now, they had returned. "We've been watching you, human. We've seen your wars, your rise, your victories. You are a threat to the order we created, and for that, you will pay." The voice deepened, filled with authority and a chilling finality. "We are the end of your existence. Surrender now, or face your annihilation." Ralston's mind raced. The Korek had been just the beginning. The true enemy, the architects, were far more dangerous, far more powerful than anything humanity had encountered. If they were truly the creators of the galaxy, then what hope did humanity have? But she refused to give in. Humanity had fought for its place among the stars, and no matter the odds, they would not bow. "Not today," she muttered under her breath. She turned to her crew, her voice sharp and commanding. "We're not surrendering. Prepare to engage. Full speed ahead, all weapons. Target their engines." The Defender surged forward, breaking the tense silence, its weapon systems flaring to life. The massive alien ship loomed ever closer, but humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The first salvo of energy weapons struck the architect ship, but the blasts seemed to barely dent the ship's surface. It was like trying to scratch an immovable mountain. "Damage report," Ralston shouted, the urgency in her voice escalating. "Direct hits on their shields, Captain. No significant damage. They're not responding to our attacks. The architects were simply too powerful. Their technology, their ships, everything about them was far beyond humanity's reach. But that didn't matter. The Defender wouldn't stop. Humanity wouldn't stop. On the Victory, General Simmons watched the battle unfold from his command center, his expression hardening with every passing second. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered, his voice unwavering. "We will not let humanity fall. Rally every ship we have, every resource. We're not backing down." As the Defender continued to exchange fire with the architects, the gap in power became more and more apparent. Every weapon fired by humanity seemed insignificant compared to the vast, destructive power of the architects. But despite all of this, one thing remained clear: humanity was not going to die quietly. In the midst of the chaos, Ralston's mind never wavered. "We need a plan," she thought. "We need something to strike back." Her eyes flicked the tactical readouts. There had to be a weakness. There always was. She looked back at her crew. "Get me a full scan of their ship. I don't care if it's a long shot. Find me something we can use." Far in the depths of the galaxy, the architects watched, their ancient minds calculating. The human fleet fought with everything they had, but it was clear to the architects that it wasn't enough. They were toying with them, testing them, seeing how much fight humanity had left. And though they didn't fear the humans, they couldn't deny the spark of curiosity that flickered within them. The architects had destroyed civilizations before, but humanity was different. They were resilient, unyielding, and most of all, dangerous. And for the architects, that was a problem. The darkness of space seemed endless, but the battle between humanity and the architects was reaching its climax. The Defender and the fleet surrounding it had been fighting for hours, their weapons sending flashes of light into the black void. Humanity's ships were battered, their hulls scarred from the relentless bombardment of the architect's superior firepower. But there was no sign of surrender, no retreat. The fleet held strong, driven by the unwavering determination to survive. Captain Ralston stood at the bridge of the Defender, eyes fixed on the screen. She could see the enormous alien ship before them, its surface almost impervious to the barrage of attacks they had unleashed. The architect's ship was a fortress, ancient, cold, and unyielding. It felt like an immovable wall, but Ralston refused to believe that humanity's fight was in vain. "Captain, we've located a potential weak spot," the officer at Tactical said urgently, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's a single small area on their main reactor core. If we can hit it with enough force, we might be able to destabilize their entire ship." Ralston's heart raced. The architects had been calculated, cold, and terrifyingly efficient. But if there was one thing humanity had proven over and over again, it was that they could adapt, fight, and surprise even the most powerful enemies. She looked at her crew, determination burning in her eyes. "Everyone on this ship has fought like hell to be here," she said firmly. "We're not losing now. Prepare all remaining weapons. We're going after that weak spot." The Defender shifted its course, dodging incoming fire from the architect's ship as it closed in on the target. The crew worked in perfect synchrony, operating on instinct and training. But the pressure of the moment weighed heavily on them. Every second counted. Every movement could mean the difference between victory and defeat. "Captain, we have one shot at this," the officer warned. "The weak spot is well protected. We need to strike with everything we have, or it's all over." Ralston nodded, swallowing her nerves. She had no doubt that if they failed, humanity would be wiped from the galaxy, just as the architects had threatened. But humanity wasn't known for giving up, not when the odds were stacked against them. They had fought for centuries to carve out their place in the stars, and now they would do whatever it took to keep it. "Fire everything we've got. Now," she commanded. The entire ship shuddered as all available weapons were unleashed. Energy blasts and missiles surged forward, ripping through space with terrifying speed. The Defender fired its final barrage, and for a split second, Everything seemed to hold its breath. Then the blast struck. The architect's ship trembled as the concentrated firepower slammed into the weak point, the small reactor core. There was a moment of silence, and then a violent explosion erupted from within the alien vessel. It was as though the stars themselves had ignited, the shockwave of energy sending ripples through the fabric of space. The architect's ship buckled under the force, massive chunks of debris scattering across the void. The Defender crew stared in awe as the enemy ship's once imposing form started to crumble. It was happening. The impossible was unfolding before their eyes. The architects, the seemingly unbeatable ancient race, were finally being overwhelmed. "We did it," Ralston whispered, her voice barely audible over the comms. "We actually did it." But even as the architect's ship began to collapse, the battle wasn't over. The remaining forces of the architects were still out there. And though they had been dealt a devastating blow, they wouldn't stop easily. The galaxy knew now that humanity had the courage to stand against them, and the ability to win. As the Defender continued to hold its position, Ralston's mind raced. This victory was just the beginning. Humanity had struck a blow for survival, but the war was far from over. The architect's return was a signal to the rest of the galaxy that humanity would not be silenced, not by ancient powers, and not by any force that dared to threaten them. "General Simmons," Ralston said, her voice steely with determination, "gather every ship in the fleet. It's time to finish this. We fight until the last breath. We make sure the galaxy knows one thing: humanity is not to be underestimated." As the message echoed across the comms, the human fleet rallied, their spirits ignited by the victory they had just achieved. They had stared death in the face and lived to tell the tale. But now, they knew something far more important than ever before. Humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with. It was the deadliest species in the galaxy, and no one would ever forget the name of the human race.